Hey, good morning, Mr. Robinson here again. You're welcome. So, look, American history 2. I'm going over here. We're looking at the Great Depression. That's the era we're on now. So, it's the opposite of what my class is. Hopefully, it's not depressing to you guys. But this we're looking at this economic collapse that happened in the United States, not only in the United States but worldwide. So, I'm going to go over. We've already started it, all right. But I'm looking. We're going to look today at the two presidents who presided over the country during the Great Depression. One, the guy who was the president when it started, Herbert Hoover, and then the guy who took over during the Depression, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. All right, Franklin Roosevelt. There's some important things about him. One, he's the only president to serve more than 2 terms. He was elected to 4 terms. All right, but he died in office. He was the president of the United States during probably the two biggest moments or crisis the country faced during the 20th century, being the Great Depression one, and then World War II is the other. So he's very important. Now, I'm going to go through first Hoover, and then we're going to look at FDR. And then I'm going through a couple different slides, some different slides on a couple different PowerPoints. Hoover's response during the Depression. Now, Herbert Hoover, remember, he was a Republican, and Republicans tend to be, they tend to have policies of less government intervention. So his idea is this thing called rugged individualism, meaning that people should take care of themselves, and, and it shouldn't be the government's job to cure the depression. So he's opposing any form of federal government intervention, federal government welfare, or direct relief to the needy. All right, he's opposed to that. But here's the problem, and sometimes that's good. But this Great Depression was so bad on people that they really needed this government intervention to get out of it. His thought of government intervention, and this happens a lot of times with conservative people, is that they believe handouts or government welfare is going to weaken people's moral fiber or their desire to pull themselves up, okay, to help themselves out, their own self respect. If the government is just giving handouts, it's going to weaken the person's desire to work and make the money on their own. That's Herbert Hoover's philosophy, in a sense. Now, he did do a couple things. One is he approves this construction of the Boulder Dam, which is also known as the Hoover Dam. All right, I show the class a clip of this from America: The Story of Us. That this building of the dam that takes place it was in Las Vegas, but it's a big deal. It's a big project because it provides electricity to the West Coast, and it also, this construction of the dam. How are you going to build it? You need jobs. You need people to work to build it. So the government is, in a sense, they're not giving out money, but they're putting people to work with this project. But here's the thing: FDR, once he takes over, he's going to do it on a much bigger scale, putting people to work on a much bigger scale than Herbert Hoover did. Again, he still refused to lend government aid, and many people are continuing to suffer. The depression is getting worse, and he is going to be one who is blamed for it. All right. So somebody, remember, if things are going bad, somebody is always kind of going to be a scapegoat. If you guys play sports and a team loses a significant game, somebody is going to be blamed for it, typically. So a few years ago, there was a Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks and New England Patriots, and the Seahawks were going in for the winning score, but instead of running the ball, they decided to throw the ball. They throw an interception, they lose the game. Well, somebody got blamed for that. Pete Carroll is blamed for it. All right, you look at the 1986 Red Sox. When they lost that game to the New York Mets in the World Series, Bill Buckner is blamed for that. All right, if you don't know who I'm talking about, look it up. So another thing that happens with Hoover is these World War I veterans they go to D.C. to lobby for a bonus that they had been promised. They hadn't been adequately compensated for their service, and they're trying to get this bonus early that they had promised, but they're not given the bonus. Well, they refuse to leave. So now what you have is this conflict that takes place in Washington D.C. with veterans try in the federal government. And what Herbert Hoover did was when the the veterans wouldn't leave, he had them gassed. Okay. No, he's not spraying them with mustard gas, but they're getting gassed. Some people get hurt, get injured, and it's just a bad look. Right? It's a bad look on the president at the time because it looks like he doesn't really care about the American people. Remember, these veterans are trying to get this bonus because they're struggling. They're in dire straits financially, as most of the country was. So this is just an example of this whole idea of buying on credit. That was a cause. So you also have this rise of dilapidated housing or bad housing areas called Hoovervilles, basically slums but it's cardboard shacks and of people who just they can't afford good housing, so they live in these cardboard shacks or or run down shacks. Now they're not all cardboard, some are made of wood, but it's called Hoovervilles. Now Hooverville, again, he's getting blamed for this depression. Now a lot of historians say it wasn't necessarily all his fault, but he didn't do things to bring the country out of it like the guy who follows him, FDR, is going to do. Another picture of Hoovervilles, okay, rundown housing areas. Right, they're not cardboard, but you could see like that's not. He's not. These people aren't living in 3-story houses or a place with a 12-car garage, and they only got 6 cars. There's a Hoover Dam. Okay, so now there's some more stuff. I'm going to go through FDR here and some of the things he did. So FDR is elected. Now FDR, his cousin of Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt, who we studied earlier, the 26th president of the United States, and he had something called the Square Deal. I'm talking about Teddy did, Theodore. Well, his cousin, the 32nd president, Franklin Roosevelt, he has something called the New Deal. So you have the Square Deal. Now you have the New Deal. I don't know if you know about your teacher, but he's kind of a big deal. Anyways, look, so his idea of this New Deal is something to bring the country out of the Depression. So to use government intervention to cure the Depression and get the country out of it. So let's go ahead and just get into it. Now, New Deal, okay, he gets elected, he wins by a landslide. Remember, because the country is blaming Hoover for the Depression. So FDR wins big. The Democrats also won big in the House and the Senate. So what's going to happen is now you have Democrats controlling the legislative branch and the executive branch. So he's going to a lot of his policies are going to get passed or put into order. They come up with this thing called a New Deal for FDR. These are the things it has: relief for the needy, economic recovery, financial reform. These are basically 3 R's. And he's trying to combat the causes of the Depression. Financial reform, particularly having to do with the banks. Relief for the needy, meaning trying to give some federal government aid to these people who are obviously in need of more money. So he's going to come up with things like a social security system. Economic recovery that's basically involves putting people to work, having these government projects put into place so people can go back to work. Reforming the banks, all right. So he comes up, and this is important, the Glass-Steagall Act, where Congress passes it. And it established the FDIC, which the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, what that does is important, is that it provides insurance for money that's put into the bank. Remember, when I talked about last week that one of the causes here was a lot of people put their money in the bank, but it wasn't insured. So you try to draw your money out of the bank, and the bank doesn't have it. They lost it. That's a problem. People are going to be irritated with that. So now the FDIC is providing insurance for that money that is in the bank. The Federal Securities Act. Remember, there was a problem with the stock market and people investing things in stocks or corporations, and then they lose their money. Well, the Federal Securities Act, what that did is now a corporation has to provide complete information on their stock offerings. And if they don't do that, then they're liable to the people who are investing in them. So this is another thing that's put into place to try to combat the causes of the Depression. Helping the American people, this is putting people back to work. You have the Agricultural Adjustment Act, sought to raise crop prices by lowering production. Remember, one of the problems had been overproduction of farm goods or of agricultural goods. And so now the government is lowering production and actually paying people not to grow overproduced crops. There he is. The government paid farmers to leave a certain amount of every acre unseeded, okay, because we don't want to overproduce. That was the cause of the Depression. Civilian Conservation Corps, this is important as well. Putting young men to work developing parks, planting trees, because remember that had been the erosion of the soil had been a problem and led to that Dust Bowl. So now putting young men to work by planting trees, developing parks, that's in a sense similar to the Hoover Dam, is that the government has a project that they're paying people and putting people to work. And then they're providing loans to homeowners, okay, to help people out with the housing market. So with the New Deal, obviously it's good, that much federal government aid is going to come under attack, and it did. FDR expanded the size of the federal government more than any other president, probably ever, really. Because he felt that the government needed to expand to help out the American people. So the government at the time was spending more money than it received in revenue. Remember, they couldn't really collect taxes as much because people didn't have money to pay taxes. So it's deficit spending. That should say liberal there. Liberal critics are arguing that it didn't do enough to cure the problems of the Depression. But the conservatives on the other hand are saying you're spending too much money. We're moving more towards a socialist state. That was what they were saying. And then I think so. That's it. That's all I'm gonna go over today. So the assignment here is you can look at these PowerPoints. I put them on Canvas. The assignment is I basically give you a bank of things. All right, like deficit spending, Republican Party, Democrat. I give you a bank of terms, and you have to put the terms in either the FDR column or the Herbert Hoover column. Okay, FDR stands for Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in case you didn't know. But you have to put them in which column they go with. All right.